Hi everyone, thanks for joining our webinar, LodgeLink COVID-19 Update. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording today's session and we'll be sending it out with a copy of the presentation so that you can refer to it later. We've also muted everybody's mics, but if you have any issues, if you need any help, please feel free to use the chat window and one of the moderators will be able to assist you. You can also use the Q&A functionality to ask any questions that you might have, and then we can address all of those at the end of the webinar. And with that, I will hand it over to Vinny.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining LodgeLink COVID-19 Update. First and foremost, I hope that everyone, including your colleagues, family, and friends, are safe and healthy during this unprecedented time. Our employees, in fact, are working virtually to help keep us safe while supporting our clients' needs. In fact, I'm coming to you live from my virtual office in New York as we continue our lockdown here through May 15th. The theme for today's presentation is navigating a shifting landscape. Obviously, we are dealing with this pandemic the best we can, but it's also caused significant travel-related issues, business closures, and challenges globally. As a result of this environment, our intention today is to share the data and key insights that we've collected from our customers, our suppliers, and from our industry partners over the past month. As part of our commitment to you, the team wanted to share those best practices and insights, trends, buying patterns, and finally, how LodgeLink can support travel or crew accommodation issues that you may be facing during this time. In closing, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for spending a brief amount of time with us today. We also want to say thank you. Thank you for your business. I'm going to shift it over to Chris Copeland now, who'll start to take you through the rest of the update. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Vinny. Appreciate that. Today we have a short presentation. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll cover the trends that we're seeing in the market, both in our customers and our suppliers' perspective. We'll take a look at LodgeLink and how we're responding to COVID-19. We'll also take a look at what we're doing to support our clients in this time, and we'll finish up with about a 10-minute question and answer period. So to get started, let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Chris Copeland, Business Development Manager for LodgeLink. As well, I have Melissa Edwards, aka Mel, on the line. Many of you have met. Hey, Mel.
Hey.
So what we'll do is we'll lead this presentation, and Mel will help facilitate the question period. So trends that we see in the marketplace, we'll start there. We're going to focus on two categories in particular, the first being accommodations landscape and what's happening in the market from a macro perspective, as well as the details on what adjustments hotels and lodges are making during the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, we'll give a quick overview of essential services, as we know many of our customers fall under this scope, and we'll look at what is working to continue and how our customers are adjusting to the current circumstances. To speak on the current accommodations environment, I'm going to invite Chris Vittor, our Senior Manager of Revenue and Supply, to review some of the key trends that we're seeing with accommodation suppliers across Canada and the US. Chris?
Thanks, Chris. Well, let's start with hotels. As you all know, with the emergence of COVID-19, there are travel bans and physical distancing measures. And because of this, we've seen a tremendous amount of hotel closures. The latest estimates are roughly 60% of properties across North America, and the longer that this goes on, the more closures we'll see. And occupancy rates have obviously plummeted. We're sitting around 20% in the US and 15% in Canada. However, most markets are below 10%. Now that said, hotels that are still operating are mainly accommodating first responders, overflow for healthcare workers, and customers that are working in the essential services sectors that we'll cover shortly. These properties are also seeing an increased demand for rooms with kitchenette suites, which allow guests to practice physical distancing and cook their own meals. Beyond that, the hotels are taking increased sanitary measures, such as more sanitizing stations, more frequent cleaning of common areas, and some properties are even pre-screening their staff. They're also taking physical distancing measures such as spreading guests out in terms of room allocation, closing common areas like lounges, breakfast rooms, fitness facilities, and pools, and providing bagged meals for takeaway. Finally, as you've likely seen if you've had to change any of your own personal travel plans lately, most travel suppliers with airlines and hotels are relaxing their cancellation policies. And we're working with them to communicate their policy changes for our customers. So for those of you in need of hotel accommodations, there are safe, available options, and we're able to help you source them during this ever-changing environment. So when we look at lodges or camps, it's an interesting time in Canada as the outbreak of COVID-19 is coinciding with the spring breakup, and many lodges are shut down due to road bans and decreased activity in their areas anyway. However, for the lodges that do remain open, they are mimicking many of the increased sanitary and physical distancing measures that hotels have implemented. So again, if you need help navigating which lodge or camp facility are still open, our team will be happy to help secure availability for you and make your team aware of the safety measures that have been put in place at each of those facilities. If you have any questions regarding the current state of hotels or lodges in your area, please submit a question through the chat. It will be received anonymously and we'll get to it during the Q&A session. And with that, I'd like to hand you over to Scott Vigneault, our Manager of Market Growth, and he can review what work is going on and the essential services situation in Canada and the US.
Thanks, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us virtually. It's a pleasure to be able to provide some of the insights that we've learned over the past 4 to 5 weeks. It's certainly been an interesting time for our team, and I'm sure the same for yours. So I'm going to touch on 3 points in particular. First, what work are we seeing continue? Secondly, how are we seeing essential services be defined in both Canada and the US? And then third, we'll take a look at some examples of how our clients are responding to the current environment and what we've been able to do to help them over the past month or so. So to start, in terms of what work is continuing, obviously with the onset of coronavirus in combination with oil prices being down more than 50% on the year, spring breakup, a lot of businesses have ceased their operations or have significantly reduced their operating environment. On top of that, in terms of future work, we're seeing the bidding process slow down a bit. Some projects are being pushed out into Q3, Q4 of this year, and even some uncertainty as to whether some projects will be pushed into the new year. That being said, there is still work that's continuing, and it's predominantly in those services and in those sectors that are deemed essential. So essential services are being defined relatively similarly between Canada and the US, but there are some nuances, and we'll unpack that here in just a minute. But in essence, any service that is preserving life, health, and basic societal functions is continuing. So these include your first responders, your healthcare workers, and in our case, and in our customers' case, it's predominantly your critical infrastructure workers. So these are oftentimes people working in the critical services in terms of utilities. So those that are providing the essential power we need to keep the lights on every day, your hydro sector, natural gas, oil and gas, electrical networks, and telecom as well. Today wouldn't be possible if that work weren't continuing. On top of that, any worker that's providing an essential good like food or medicine, obviously that work is continuing as well. So on top of this network that's been defined as essential, there's also businesses that are deemed critical to the supply chain of these essential services, LodgeLink being one of them. So this definition leaves a really broad network of clients that are still operating today. And again, many of them are our customers that we're helping support. In terms of what we're seeing within our own customer base, we're seeing activity continue in a few key sectors. The first that I'll highlight is the energy sector. Of course, there's a perfect storm right now with COVID, low oil prices, spring breakup. So drilling activity is certainly down, but we are seeing activity in those companies providing energy services like matting. Matting companies are quite busy throughout spring breakup. Also maintenance work on critical pieces of infrastructure like pipelines and compressor stations, as well as some new build projects. There's still work planning to go ahead. The second industry where we see work continuing is telecommunications infrastructure. So service and maintenance work is continuing, as well as projects that have been planned for new build infrastructure. That work is still going on. And then the last that we're seeing in terms of our own activity is the construction industry, especially those that are involved in building critical pieces of infrastructure. In Canada, we see projects like Site C continuing, the major pipeline work on the West Coast, the LNG projects, as well as mining, and then general construction in terms of hospitals, road work. We see that work carrying on. So that said, we've heard from a lot of our clients to gather this information and to provide this update, but if we haven't heard from you, we'd like to. Feel free to leave us a comment in the Q&A today, or get a hold of Chris or Melissa, call them, email them. We'd really like to hear how your work's being impacted, and if there's anything that we can do on the accommodations or travel side of things to help ease the pain in terms of the current restrictions in terms of the operating environment, we're happy to help. If we look at essential services now, again, they're being defined relatively similar in Canada and the US, but starting with Canada, these are the 10 categories that have been recommended by the federal government's National Strategy for Critical Infrastructure. Now, mind you, these are purely advisory in nature. It's up to each provincial, municipal, territorial, and Indigenous jurisdiction to legislate their own essential services. And so it's definitely a changing landscape. Earlier this week, we saw Quebec reinstate residential construction as a essential service. And so we urge you to stay in contact with your provincial and municipal authorities. That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information in terms of what is being deemed essential, and it is changing on nearly a daily basis. If we flip to the US, they've defined their essential services a bit more narrowly. So you see they've got 16 categories here. As opposed to Canada, the US has categories like energy, nuclear, dams. All those three would be defined under the energy category within Canada. But again, these are advisory in nature from the federal government. It's up to the state, local, tribal, and territorial jurisdictions within the US to recommend their own essential services. Although both in Canada and the US, we see the states and provinces staying pretty consistent with these guidelines. But again, there are certainly nuances, so stay tuned for your local updates wherever you are. And then lastly, just to touch on how our customers are responding to the current environment. Of course, many have had to stop working, which is very unfortunate. We hope that things change soon, but safely. For those that are continuing working on critical infrastructure projects, they're taking increased measures to keep their people safe. So starting with physical distancing, staying at least 2 meters apart on the job site. For some projects, that's difficult to do. We see examples like the LNG Canada project where they've significantly reduced the workforce on site to be able to meet that threshold of 2 meters and just keeping the bare essential people on site. In addition to that, we see testing measures being implemented, screening people for COVID symptoms just to minimize the potential impact of spreading on site and further reducing the productivity of the workforce. And then lastly, PPE. PPE is not new to many of our customers, but things like face masks, latex gloves are being implemented, but certainly not new for many of our customers. The last point that I'll touch on is how we've been able to help in terms of accommodations. So Chris and his team are getting up to the minute information from our brand partners on both the hotel and lodging side, and we can help you if there's been a closure in your area. We can help navigate which facilities are open and that have implemented some of the increased sanitary and health and safety measures that Chris was talking about earlier. And then very last, we've found some creative solutions in markets where there's been hotel closures. We've actually been able to reopen some facilities for customers with a large enough demand. And Chris and Mel are going to touch on that in just a minute. So I hope that that helped. This is just a snippet of some of the information we've gathered from clients over the past few weeks. We're eager to hear from you and hear how things are going on your end. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mel to talk through how LodgeLink internally is operating and the support that we're able to offer you today. So Mel, over to you.
Thanks, Scott. The LodgeLink team are doing a host of things to provide continued support and service to our clients. First and foremost, we're taking care of ourselves and practicing physical distancing, which includes everyone working remotely from home. Our team is functioning 100%, which allows us to provide all our core services and features, whilst remaining in constant contact with our suppliers, customers, travel associations, and governments. By staying up to date with the most current communication from these areas, we provide all clients with a complete picture in this ever-changing environment. Lastly, we're finding creative solutions for our customers wherever we can, and we will review a couple of those here in a minute. So to go into this in a bit more detail, here is a glimpse of some of our team. Hopefully there's some familiar faces here, and as you can see, I'm allowed to bring my dog Strider to work. As I mentioned, we're all working remotely and our team is functioning well. All of our business divisions, from account management, customer success, reservations, billing admin, and product development, are all operating at 100%. Our technologies are allowing us to maintain our service standards and provide you with the same services and features that you're used to. These include extending our customer service line to 24/7. We have our live chat and reporting function available on our platform, consolidated invoicing, and negotiated rates. Also, our product team are busy working on enhancements on the platform, and we look forward to sharing some exciting updates with you soon. Our team is also staying up to date with the supplier updates in the key regions where we offer coverage, and we are currently working on expanding this coverage further. In Canada, we continue to add properties in BC and Ontario markets. And in the US, we're actively expanding into multiple states. We're also continuing our integration into the Sabre GDS system, which allows us to provide real-time availability and pricing for hotels. As of today, we have up to 90% of our hotel properties loaded into GDS. Also, it's worth mentioning that if you don't see a property on our online platform, then please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to contact the supplier and have it added to you. Now over to Chris.
Thanks, Mel. As mentioned, there are a few creative solutions that we've been working on with our clients, and I'd like to highlight a couple of those now. In our first example, we've seen many properties have closed down, and we've been able to work with those suppliers to reopen facilities exclusively for customers with large crews that are working for an extended period of time and would like to isolate their healthy workforce. This, of course, provides a safer and more controlled environment than sharing a facility with other guests. Now, for smaller crews, this option may not be economical or practical. You know, on average, we see properties need a minimum of 30% of their rooms filled to consider reopening. If this is an option that you're interested in, please contact me offline and we'll explore this option for you. A second example we've initiated internally and for our clients is through our aero travel department, and includes securing deeply discounted future airline passes for destinations that we typically fly for business. This is a great cost savings initiative with minimal risk, as refunds or credits can be issued if you don't utilize those passes. As mentioned, in addition, we're adding coverage to the request of our customers and working proactively with clients to add coverage in areas where they know they'll be in the future, so that when the time comes, we'll be ready to support you. Finally, in terms of duty of care, we've had to relocate several clients to alternative accommodations due to closures, and we're able to do so proactively by remaining in constant contact with our supplier base in the marketplace. Our supply team has a keen understanding of where to best source those properties and create solutions. In summary, I've highlighted a few takeaways that we talked about today. First, accommodation suppliers have to continue to update their processes and procedures and heighten their sanitation standards, all with safety in mind. They've also adopted more flexible cancellation policies. Second, the Canadian and US governments have provided guidelines on essential services. These are services deemed to be critical to preserve life and health and basic societal functioning, and can vary by jurisdiction. Thirdly, our clients continue to work during this time, especially since many of them are identified as part of the list of essential services. Companies are deploying screening procedures, physical distancing, and reduced workforce amongst this crisis. And last but not least, LodgeLink is always here to help you. We continue to operate remotely 24/7 and secure safe alternative facilities and solutions for you. We're committed to staying up to date on the ever-changing accommodations landscape and sharing this information with you. I'd like to pass it back over to Mel or Steph to start the question period.
Given that we want to respect your time and simply provide a brief update, we're going to move on to the Q&A shortly. Before we do, I just want to reiterate that we're here to help you in any travel-related needs during the COVID pandemic and beyond. Here is the contact information for our customer support team. They are available 24/7 to assist, and we'll also display Chris and myself's direct contact information after the Q&A. And with that, we'll jump into the Q&A session.
Great, thank you, team. So if you haven't already, please feel free to enter your questions into the chat and we'll address them. I know we already received one and we've already actually received a few from our clients in advance of this session that we'd like to answer today. So the first one is, are hotels and lodges updating pricing to reflect the current market?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. It's a bit of a layered answer, and most simply, it's based on supply and demand. So what does that mean? For the markets that I see that are saturated, so have a lot of hotels in them, I've seen some discounts as much as 30 to 40% off what we would normally get as rates. But in other markets, let's say, for example, where there were 10 hotels, if 8 of them have shut down, that leaves about 20% of the inventory, so they don't necessarily need to drop their rates as much. So it's dependent on the market and the supply. And what I would suggest is to reach out to Chris or Melissa directly, and they may be able to help you with some more accurate pricing if you have any in the near future.
Great, thank you, Chris. And the next one is, how do I know what facilities are available to book?
I can answer this one. If a hotel or a lodge has let us know that they're temporarily closed, you'll see a call for availability notification in the search results on our platform. However, if you still want to stay there, please call us. As mentioned earlier, accommodation providers may only need 30% occupancy to reopen, and they are willing to work with us to ensure our clients have somewhere to stay for their crews to stay and work can continue. If in doubt, just please reach out to us at our reservation team 24/7 to discuss what's best for your cruise.
Great, thank you, Melissa. The next question is, what happens to my bookings if I have to cancel?
I can answer that one too. As Chris discussed earlier, we are seeing more relaxed cancellation policies from all of our accommodation providers. In this industry, we understand projects and jobs can be delayed or cancelled for any number of reasons. So all we ask is that you reach out to our reservations team at the earliest convenience. They'll work with properties to try and avoid any cancellation penalties that may come up.
Great, thanks, Melissa. And if a property is closed, how will I know when it's going to reopen?
Yeah, I'll get that one. I mean, there's no easy answer. It's dependent on the market. It's dependent on COVID-19. The short answer is reach out to us and we can help you. Let us know which property you're interested in and we'll let you know, because we have relationships with the GMs, the guest services managers, and the other people that are working there.
Great, thank you, Chris. Now, if there are any other questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A functionality right now. I think that's everybody.
And share with any colleagues if you wish. We appreciate any feedback on future topics so we can address them. Please complete the survey in the follow-up email you'll be receiving. Once again, on behalf of the entire LodgeLink team, we want to thank you for your continued support, and we wish you, your teams, and your families good health during this difficult time. My contact information and Mel's is listed on the screen, and please don't hesitate to reach out and call us if you have any questions. Take care of everybody and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.